Welcome to the Bourbon Daily, the podcast about everything bourbon delivered to you every day of the week. Today on the show, we talk about Sweet Lizzy, a source bourbon brand started by Robin Jones. My name is McNew. Please join me in welcoming my co-host Steve Akeley, along with our special guest Robin Jones.
Hey, Robin, how you doing?
Hey, Steve. How are you? How are you, McNew?
I'm good.
You?
Very cool. We are excited to talk about your brand. You know, I think you're doing something that probably a lot of people that are listening to this podcast would be interested in doing. It just makes sense. If you're a whiskey fan and you're really into it and you're so into it, you listen to podcasts or you read blogs and all those type of things. At some point, you've either started to think about, could I make my own whiskey via a distillery? Could I make something in the backyard? Could I start a brand, sourcing whiskey? So you're doing one of those things. It's going to be very cool, to talk to someone who's doing that. But before we get to that, we always think it's important for our guests to get to our audience to get to know our guests on a personal basis. So if you don't mind, the first question is always the same. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I was born in Ohio, in rural Ohio, and grew up in Ross County. I graduated high school, went to college. I majored in computer information systems. Oh, that's a problem. Sorry.
No problem. No worries.
Okay. So anyway, I majored in computer information systems. I made that my life. Everything was about computers everywhere I worked. I've worked for General Electric, Ashland Oil, IBM. I also had my own company for 12 years for data service delivery. So we were competitors to IBM, and we actually won projects against IBM as we placed our bids. I was raised by my father and my mother. They were separated, and we'll talk about her during the process of the program. Now, for me, I came to California from Ohio because I was recruited by California, Berkeley at the Haas School of Business. I was the director of the computer center there, and I retired in 2015. I took an early buyout, and I asked myself, what do I want to do with the rest of my life?
Right.
So at that time, I had been working full time for corporate. After I sold my company after 12 years, and that's when I went to work for IBM. So now I'm, saying, what do I want to do? Well, I knew I wanted to teach. So I started to teach. And from there, it just kind of blossomed into, is this what you want to do? Is this your purpose? Is this what you're giving back? And I had to sit down and really look at where I came from and look at my roots to decide where I wanted to go. And as I mentioned, my mother being an alcoholic and being very difficult to grow up, in the home of an alcoholic, I wanted something to honor her memory because she did quit. She became sober at the age of 45. She walked away. She never looked back.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother did the same thing. He, inherited the alcoholic trait. He walked away at 45 and never looked back. So if I can do anything at all to honor her memory and to help others realize that alcoholism, okay, it's an addiction, but an addiction is a personality trait. It's a personality, and a personality is a character trait. So if you change that character trait, you change your personality, and you can be, you can come away from what you're working, what's attacking you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you still live in California today. Is this it? Are you going to stay in California? Or is there any thought of going back to the Midwest, or what's the long-term plans for you?
So my long-term plan is to get closer to Kentucky because I didn't realize that I had such a passion for this business until I started. I've always been a collector of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a drinker.
Uh-huh.
Until, like I said, if I went out, with family and friends or girlfriends, then, we'd order a round of drinks. I was the only one sitting there with a bourbon cocktail or, a straight shot. So my goal is to eventually get back, not to Ohio's too cold, but I would like to be somewhere in that close vicinity so that I am closer to home.
Yeah. I like it. McNew, what would you like to know? You've always got something interesting you ask during this segment. So what do you got?
Yeah, sure. So from Ohio to California, was there any culture shock when you first moved?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think it was as great as anticipated, because when I worked for IBM, I traveled and I was more on the West Coast than I was on the East Coast.
Okay. So
I
you were
was
used to it.
Right, exactly. So I kind of
Okay.
knew what to expect. And I would always tell myself, oh, one day I would love to work in Silicon Valley, because that's a tech world down there. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh, if I could just get into Silicon Valley. And, lo and behold, I did. And that's, that was my dream come true.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, what we'll do next, we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, Robin's going to tell us about why she decided to get into business, what her business is, and where you guys can find out more about it. We'll do that in just a few.
Welcome back to the Bourbon Daily. Today we have Robin Jones of Sweet Lizzy Bourbon.
Yes, we do. So, Robin, the first question is, why did you want to get into the whiskey business? You said you drank a little bit of it, you collected some bourbon and things like that. But is it just that passion, personal interest type of thing, or was there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that. I can think of 4 reasons. And
Okay.
the first reason being, bourbon is always my drug of choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the white drinker, I'm a brown drinker, but it has to be a bourbon. I can take a cognac, but I'd rather have the bourbon. If I'm cooking or baking, bourbon is always going to be an ingredient in the product.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one item that I bake every year, sweet potato cheesecake, and I get an overabundance of requests for that. And I tell everybody that's my secret sauce. Let's see what else. So I want to also bring to your attention that the Sir RAJ is another reason that I started this, because I wanted to make and curate, as you said, my own cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, it helps others to know that, there's more to bourbon than just drinking it straight out the bottle. And lastly, but not last, I want to mention about my mother. And I'm gonna try to do this without getting emotional. But I'm saving that for last. And I'll talk to her situation throughout the interview, because she comes up in many parts of it. And that takes me into the branding.
Yeah,
question.
I mean, that's my next question. Before we really get into the whiskey company itself, tell us a little bit about the branding. Where you come up with the name Sweet Lizzy? What exactly does that mean, and how did you come up with it?
My mother's name was Elizabeth, so I coined it after her as Sweet Lizzy.
Mm-hmm.
I knew first I thought, what about sweet something, sweet brown sugar, Sweet RAJ, and then one day I was just sitting here playing around with some names and words, and Sweet Lizzy just kind of rang a bell. So I was really excited about that.
Uh-huh.
And I threw it out to, a few friends who thought it was a really good idea, and they liked the name. She was called Lib, L-I-B, but Sweet Lizzy, I think, is very appropriate for this product.
Yeah. And for anybody looking that up, there's an E at the end, and that was kind of a TTB thing, right? If you put sweet on there, that's almost like an ingredient has been added to sweeten things, and that's not the case. It's whiskey. So you had to change the traditional spelling of sweet and add an E on there, right? That's how that came about.
Yes, you're exactly correct, because everybody will say, people that aren't in the industry, they'll say, well, you didn't spell sweet correctly. And I say, wait, tell them that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about your whiskey company. What are your goals with it?
So my goals, first, the name RAJ. Did you want me to talk about that? Sir RAJ?
Sure.
Yeah, we can jump into that. Yeah.
So the company is actually called Sir RAJ, because I wanted to put a male influence in there somewhere. Since Sweet Lizzy in the picture on the bottle should be of me, it looks like it caters to women. So I called it the Sir RAJ, because I wanted men to feel like they were a part of it as well. Raj is my initials. I was named after my mother. Her last name was Robinson. My middle name is after my father, who was Alfred, and I'm an Alfreda. And then,
Gotcha.
yeah, last name's Jones. So that's how I came up with the Sir RAJ. I just think that this is something we really want to get involved in terms, when I say we, I'm speaking of myself, but I try to talk to about my company and we, third party, because eventually I want the proceeds to be able to give back to the community. I want to raise the funds that's going to, and have a percentage of funds that's going to be donated and given back to students who are graduating college with extreme student loans.
Oh, nice.
I feel like in doing a lot of this research, and I actually did a lot of research on this project, on doing a lot of the research, I found that a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction is brought on by depression. And a lot of the depression is brought on by a lack of finance. And when students, and I know just from experience working at Cal Berkeley, those student loans can be $3,000-$4,000 a month, if not more.
Wow.
And, you know, if you think about, yeah, because their program's pretty pricey. And if you think about how these students graduate high school, and in the more traditional setting, there is no 529 plan, there is no college fund, you know, but do they just hold out and just say, okay, I'm just going to go down here and work at the corner store because I can't afford to go to college? Or even if they go to a trade school, or it's in California, 2-year colleges are free, but that's not the case everywhere. So they're paying all of these loans, and it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 years to pay them off. So if you graduate college at 22, you're 42 years old. What do you have to show for it? You're paying someone else's rent, someone else's mortgage. You may be able to afford a car. God forbid if you default on a student loan. If you do default on a student loan, there goes your credit. You know, they're garnishing your wages. So what is it that, you know, Sir Raj can do to help this next generation? If they don't have a student loan, then I want to set up the funds so that they can come and get a down payment for their mortgage. It's going to be steep, you know, monies that's coming in. And at my age, I'm not looking to build a wealth, but I do want to leave a legacy. And I think that if my mom were here, she would agree, because I've had some people attack me by saying, oh, if this is after your mom, you should have done a Betty Ford Center or a rehab center. But when my mother was going through her situation, rehab centers were not affordable for low income or middle income people. Even now, if you have a rehab center, it's so costly. How many people actually go, how many stay, and how many are, you know, graduate from the program and stay clean for their life. I have a friend, and we attended a funeral of my 36-year-old nephew addiction just 2 weeks ago. And I was asking him, I said, how many rehab centers did you go through before you stopped? He said, I stopped on my own. He said, but I went through 15. And he said, the last one I went to, remember, you took me there. So I was like, I had forgotten about that. And yeah, and he thanked me and everything. And he said, but I've been clean now for a long time. And he said, it just made all the difference in the world to me.
Yeah.
So basically my future goals for Sir Raj is to accumulate a wealth that's going to be able to give back to the community, to young people in the community, and also at the same time help them to understand drinking is a responsible act.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great legacy to leave. Speaking of Sir Raj, though, you also have a trademarked cocktail by that name. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I trademarked the cocktail because, like I said, when I would go out with the lady friends or, you know, out to dinner and I'd order a cocktail, I always preferred the sidecar. I don't know whether you're familiar with the sidecar or not. Okay. But I would always request a rye bourbon. So usually I ask for a bullet. And I would have them make it with bullet. And then, you know, you have your Grand Marnier or your, you know, what's the other one? The Curacao. So I took that and I liked it, but it was still just a little bitter for others. I felt like they wouldn't enjoy it. So I came back and I created a cocktail that I thought they would enjoy and it'd be appealing with the sugar rim. And I made it through my Sir Raj, my Sweet Lizzy, triple sec, and simple syrup with a splash of lemon. and it's really light. I wouldn't suggest drinking more than one or two because it really does creep up on you. It really cuts through that high proof that you would think 117, oh wow, or 116, you know, that's going to be too burny, or it's going to be too hot, or I'm not going to like it. And to test my theory, went to one of the higher end restaurants in Ohio one night, and I tipped the waitress and I asked her to buy the ladies who were there having a group meeting. I brought them all around of this Sir RAJ. And because I asked them, do you like bourbon? What are you drinking? Have you ever had bourbon? And they all said no. Bourbon, they didn't even want to. So I bought the Sir RAJ and I had the waiter or, waitress to deliver it to them. And they loved it. They wanted it then and now. I'm going to the liquor store right after this and buying, no, you can't do it. It's not out yet. They really, they enjoyed it.
It sounds light and refreshing. And before we started recording, you mentioned the color of it. It needs to be a specific color.
Right. So it's an amber color. You can see that.
It's very pretty.
Mm-hmm. And, I've gone out and I've actually started ordering the Sir RAJ. And one day I had a cocktail waitress tell me, she said, we've had quite a few requests for that drink, but I can't find the alcohol. So I thought, oh, good, that's a good thing, because we were still in the, concept stage. And I told her, I said, well, I'm pretty sure it'll be on the market soon. So if you have Bullet, you can just make it with Bullet. And so they, with Bullet, and, has kind of almost the same flavor.
Yeah.
Okay.
You navigated something that is fairly difficult on your own, and that's starting a liquor company. And it's amazing to think about what you've done by yourself. But when you and I started talking, and you had initially reached out to me, you wanted to know if I'd be willing to try your product and talk to you a little bit about it. And I said, hey, in terms of production, if you want some help, because you're like, I'm still working my way through these things, you really should work with Royce Neely, because he's got a lot of partnerships where he helps people who source brands, he bottles, he does the labels, everything. And since that time, you've talked to Royce, and you are going to be working with him, right?
Absolutely. I immediately reached out to Royce. I think it was after a couple of days because it was the holiday weekend, and introduced myself and gave him the feedback that you had presented to me. And I told him I would like to talk with him about, moving forward. And we've been, going back and forth with that dialogue ever since. This is perfect. It's just absolutely perfect because it brings me nearer to home. When I first graduated from college, like I said, Ashland was one of my companies I worked for. I was in Lexington. I was telling Royce that. I worked down here on Man of War Boulevard. I was in the data center down there.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So I know. So I was there for almost 4 years. And the only reason I left then because my father became ill, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which he later passed. But I remember walking in and telling them that I wasn't going to be able to stay, and giving them a notice. And I said, when he gets better, I'll be back. But right now I'm going home. And he didn't get better. So I didn't go back. I stayed home, and that's where I've been all until Berkeley.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some challenges you would warn someone about if they wanted to get started with their own brand?
Oh my goodness. So challenges, let me get over here. Let me see what I put down for your challenges, because I know I gave you some good ones. If you don't mind, let's shuffle. So when we talk about challenges, I say that there's always going to be challenges, and there's always going to be risks. So what you need to realize is how you overcome these challenges and these risks depends on how much effort you want to put into it. As Steve mentioned, I took this on myself. And because I have been in business before, I know the pitfalls you can fall into. I know the circumstances sometimes that come up against you. They're not different. They're just a different industry. So you really have to watch out. And, there were a couple of times that, I've gotten caught. But I hope that I've learned from those mistakes and I'm able to overcome them. And I'll say the biggest challenge I had was convincing the state of California, ABC licensure, that it was my business, that I did want to start this business, and that I wasn't being paid by anybody else who couldn't get a license to do this.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, it took me about 7 months to convince to get my license because they were adamant that I was not doing this just for my pleasure.
Really? They thought like you're fronting for someone else?
They thought I was fronting. They thought I was fronting, yes. And they thought that someone had actually given me the money to come in and do it.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about what the future holds for you. I know that you touched on that briefly. Obviously, you've got great things that you're planning to do with the proceeds from the business. But where do you see this thing going? Is there going to be more products? Different, maybe different proofs, different mash bills. Are you looking to be a small regional brand where you can keep your hands around this thing? Or are you looking to grow bigger, where you might be able to find it across the country, maybe even globally? What are you thinking that you can grow this thing into being?
I do anticipate a global growth.
Okay.
That's for sure. There will be different mash bills. There will be different proofs, but for the most part, the proof will stay right at about 115 and above, probably between 115 and 120-ish.
Oh, I like you.
Yeah, it's a good place.
Yeah.
I think that if it gets higher than that, we're talking, big guys, you're talking Bookers, you're talking Stag,
Right.
and I don't know whether I want to be in that space with them because, they've made their mark and, they're into they're deep aging, and I want to stay light on the aging. I want to be right in that 5-6 year space for aging. And I think where we are right now, it's just a good place. Global, yes. Future, for now we have a accelerated bourbon at 117 proof with a mash of rye. We have a 120 proof with a mash of rye with a 5-year aging. We want to also age in cognac barrels, and that's where Royce is going to come in and be very helpful because he said he has access to those. This summer or late summer, I want to roll out corn. And I think that's going to tie in with, people harvest corn in the winter or in the fall, I'm sorry. So I want that to be corn. And because my dad was a farmer, grew up on the farm, and he always had a cornfield. So I want a product that's going to honor him as well. The corn is going to be about 95 proof. So it's going to give you a little bit of a burn, and it's going to be aged. And then I want to finish another product of that same corn in Cabernet barrels.
Nice.
Ooh, that sounds amazing.
Very cool. Well, Robin, I think people want to follow this journey. They may want to learn more about you. Where can they do so? I'm talking websites, social media, whatever you'd like to share.
Okay, so we're in the process now. I have a landing page, but the website, we're working on it at this time as we speak. We want to get it set up when we get everything rolled out. So I was hoping to have it done by today, but the guy's been off sick all week. So I don't want to have to do it myself, but if I have to, I will. Hey, that's the good part about,
that IT background could come in handy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But anyway, my email address is Robin, ROBIN, at Sir RAJ Inc. That's S as in Sam, I is Indian, R is Robin, R is Robin, A is Apple, J is John, INC Inc.com.
Okay.
Robin at SirRajInc.com.
Okay. You are you on social media at all yet? Any Instagram, anything like that? Facebook? Can we find you there?
I started an Instagram page.
Okay.
And it is Sweet, SWEETE _ Lizzy, LIZZY.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll have to check that out and follow along. All right, McNew, how about you? Where can people find you?
I am on Instagram at McNew ABV.
All right. For me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. We've also got a company website. That thing's abvnetwork.com. Check it out because everything that we do is out there. All of our previous shows, our blogs, our shop, our events, so much more, abvnetwork.com. McNew, anything else to say before we get out of here?
I'd like to remind the audience to please give us a 5-star review that includes comments. It helps new people find the show, which is very important to us. And if you like what we're doing, we ask that you please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/the ABV Network.
All right, Robin, thanks so much for joining us and telling us about what you got going on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
for the interview. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care.
For our audience, we'll have a brand new show for you tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Until then, take care, everybody. See you.
Bye.
Peace.